Welcome to JSA TV, where we're covering the latest news, stories, trends, and innovations from thought leaders like this guy to my right from the world of digital infrastructure. And Nick, we are coming to our audience live. That's right, we are live from beautiful downtown Austin, Texas at Data Cloud USA Metro Connect at the Data Cloud USA event. And this guy to my right is Mr. Nick Cruz. Nick is the COO at GPC Infrastructure. Nick, how are you?
I'm doing great today, Dean, and thanks for having me on. It's great to be here.
It's always great to have somebody who's got a really great voice for radio immediately on. Your voice, by the way, is perfect for this.
Thank you so much. That's really great. I love to hear that. You know, I always have some of those insecurities when you listen to a recording of yourself. And you're
Everybody does.
Yeah, everyone's like, but that really makes me feel good.
What I hear when I hear myself is just this like whiny little like, Midwest like Chicago-y thing happening. But enough about that. Nick, for our viewers that don't already know, why don't you tell them a little bit about GPC Infrastructure?
Sure, I'd love to, Gene. So you can think of GPC Infrastructure as a behind-the-meter IPP specifically focused on the data center space. So what we do is develop power generation assets. We're all natural gas based that are meant to service a data center load. So, you know, this could be a 200 megawatt power plant, 500 up to a gigawatt. And we develop these assets, again, all focused behind the meter, so independent of the utility, such that data centers can energize themselves on a timeline that's more on their schedule rather than the utility schedule.
I get it. When we were first talking earlier, I was just like, I'm not sure I understand this, but you put that as plainly as possible for me, and I appreciate that very much. But on to some real questions here. On-site natural gas generation, specifically siting criteria as one of the critical steps of actually making that happen. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. And there's a couple areas that are like really important here for this. I'll break it down by categories. Let's start with one of the, we'll call it go, no-go decisions. So permitting is a big one. And for a power plant, the air permit is really the most important piece. When you think about air permitting, the EPA has classified areas in the country as either attainment, which means they've attained good environmental standards, or non-attainment. When you're thinking about siting a power plant, non-attainment zones are almost a no-go from a basis. You might be able to do a small power plant depending on the degree of non-attainment. This might be a 50 megawatt plant, say in the DFW area, or maybe something more like 100 or 150 megawatts out in Salt Lake. But these attainment versus non-attainment zones are one of the first key screening criteria. And from a gas-fired plant, we're going to want to stay out of those non-attainment areas where possible. You know, sometimes you might say a small colo facility might make sense to do a non-attainment, but generally you're really going to want to focus on those areas. And the non-attainment zones are pretty small in most areas of the country. The challenge is that they're usually on the population centers. So where a lot of data centers are, for instance, Loudoun County, Virginia, non-attainment zone. DFW, non-attainment zone. Interestingly enough, where we're at right now, Austin is an attainment zone, so it's not having these same issues. So it'd be very easy to site a power plant here. Once you move off permitting, the next big question is gas supply, because if you don't have the gas molecules, you will not have a gas-fired power plant. I've seen from a lot of developers or other conversations we've had, they're like, hey, there's this gas pipeline out in our backyard. Let's just use that, right?
Yeah.
And then
it's not easy, right?
Right, it's not easy. There's a pipeline, there's gas, therefore we put our gas plant here. We're good, right? Right, no more questions. Thank you. In those cases, what we really say is that even though there's a pipeline there, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's available gas on that pipeline. And what's really important is the concept of firm gas. So this is gas supply that the midstream operator is obligated to deliver to you. So what you're really looking for is a pipeline that has adequate capacity for your needs for firm gas supply. And there's limited areas in the country where you can do that, some better than others. You know, I'll say in Texas, we're blessed with a lot of gas. Funnily enough, in PJM, kind of Ohio, Pennsylvania areas, you're blessed with a lot of gas as well.
Makes sense.
So there's markets that really make sense, both from the intersection of permitting and then the intersection of gas supply. And that, from a land screening criteria, is what you really need to look for.
I feel like I'm getting educated,
Great,
and
great.
and I absolutely love it. But nobody escapes the JSA TV seat without talking about AI. And
Perfect.
we're going to talk about AI loads specifically as they relate to the power, specifically as it relates to your position in that power as that power provider.
Right.
Tell us how that has kind of changed the game for you guys.
Yeah, I think AI loads are kind of the big industry question right now. How do we deal with these, what are potentially millisecond fluctuations that are 30%, 40% more of your nominal load? And that's a really tough engineering problem to solve because, unlike the GPUs, power generation assets are big physical machines. They have rotational inertia. These are things that do not start and stop instantaneously. So the question is, when load is moving a lot, how do you make sure you're delivering good voltage, good frequency, all the right parameters to keep the data center online, running, and happy? The answer that most of the industry is landing on is really a hybrid integration solution between battery systems and then the thermal generation component. So we call these BESS in the industry for battery energy storage system. And the thing about batteries is they can dispatch very quickly. So they'll have a controller that just basically looks at the demand. And as the gas generation plant takes a little time to ramp up, batteries step in and deal with that. I think this is something that you really need a very, we'll call it technically competent, very collaborative and focused partner on, because the challenge here is not that any individual technological piece is that difficult, but it's how do you put the pieces together that's really the secret sauce. So you want someone that's going to be thoughtful about UPS design with the data center. You want someone that really understands gas generation and really understands battery systems and that can then put all those pieces together. And that's what gets you something that's going to work.
It's so fascinating to me that for every piece of the puzzle that ultimately makes AI a reality, there are multiple pieces within that single piece, and that's really what you're talking about. To me anyway, there's like an infinite number of things that you have to be considering. One of those things is the actual pipeline, right? And that's what I want to talk about next. Like, how important is access to that pipeline? I loved your analogy that just because there's a gas pipeline in my backyard doesn't mean that I'm allowed to use that gas. Just because a car is parked in my driveway, if it's not mine, I'm not allowed to drive it away.
Exactly.
So tell me, how important is access to those pipelines?
It's really, really important. And I think one of the things you got to marry this with is that from a data center perspective, always online, tons of reliability. Tell me how many nines you want, right? Lots of nines. The grid and gas generation are very married already. The reality is a lot of the grid power is gas fired these days. So when we think about reliability from a gas pipeline, at a gas pipeline level, it can be superior to the grid. But even still, a lot of times you're going to want to have more than one pipeline connect if you're going to do a behind the meter situation. So having two independent pipelines is a huge benefit. So now the screening criteria isn't just where can I get firm gas, it's where can I get redundant firm gas. And how important is that to me? Maybe you look at some things like on-site LNG or some other backup fuel options, but those are really important questions. And when you look across the country, there's some areas where, you could have 4 major transmission lines within a 10 or 15 mile radius. And one of the nice things about gas pipelines that some viewers may not appreciate, particularly coming more from the electrical side of the world, is that gas pipelines are easier to build than electric transmission lines, significantly easier.
Okay.
We are building thousands and thousands of miles of gas pipelines every year, have done that for 40 years. The number of transmission projects are much, much, much lower. So one of the kind of, we'll call it, base commodity arbitrages that you can do as a data center is you can take advantage of the fact that building a 20 or 30 inch gas pipeline is a much lower undertaking than doing a 345 kV distribution or transmission line. So there's some real advantages on the gas side that gas can solve that power can't.
Nick, none of this sounds easy. It makes a lot of sense that guys like you are here and around and solving for some of these challenges. So specific to those challenges, scalability. what a site might need now versus what a site might need a year from now or 10 years from now, for that matter, could vary dramatically. How do
Yep.
you all, or what are the considerations around scalability?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think that's why, at GPC, we really take a partner approach to the data center. How do we tailor our agreements such that they're, the right fit for now,
Mm-hmm.
but the flexibility to do things later? And some of that could be like a bridge power to backup power approach. Some of that could be, we're doing a couple data halls. Maybe it's 200 megawatts today. Maybe it's a gigawatt 6 years from now. And one of the really nice things about gas generation, BESS, all these things is they can be very modular. And that's our design
Interesting.
approach. You build in little Lego blocks,
Mm-hmm.
right? You keep design as consistent as you can. And then as you need to advance the project and build to a larger megawatt IT load, you kind of plop down more Lego. So you do more of the same. You're not taking new risks.
Mm-hmm.
You've already solved these problems.
Yeah.
And you can be very collaborative with the data center. And on the GPC side, that's what we want to do is say, hey, what are your needs today? How are we going to address them right now? And then how are we going to address them over the next 10, 15, 20 years? Because data centers, call it a 40 plus year life cycle asset, probably more when you really think about it. Similarly, power plants are long-term infrastructure. So if you're going to take a partner approach here, you want someone who's going to be collaborative and flexible over the life cycle of the asset.
Yeah. Nick, I feel like we could probably spend another hour
We could. And I would love doing it,
but that's all the time we have. So Nick, thank you very much.
It was great being here, Dean.
Thank you. And thank you, viewers, for watching JSA TV. We'll see you real soon.